Hey, it's Brendan with Window Gang. Today I want to talk to you about pressure washer maintenance. Pressure washer maintenance is really important because if you go to a job and your pressure washer doesn't work correctly, basically your day is shot. So it's just like keeping maintenance on your car. It's the same with maintenance on your pressure washer. You want to make sure you change the filters as necessary, and oil changes every 50 hours to 75 hours, depending on use. The first thing I want to go over is the motor oil. The motor oil I'm going to be using to change the motor oil is this 10W30 synthetic, and because it's synthetic I actually get more usage out of it. You want to change your motor oil in the pressure washer every 50 hours, and with it being synthetic I get another 25 hours out of it, so I get 75 hours of use. So using the synthetic oil is basically much more economical. So now, changing the oil, there's always a standard dipstick for a pressure washer. There's variances in pressure washers, but there's always going to be a dipstick that'll let you check how much oil and how clean the oil in your machine is. Now remember, this is the motor oil. So this here is my dipstick, and pull it out and see that there is motor oil in there. It doesn't look too dirty, but I'm going to go ahead and change it anyway. Once I get that back on, I'll go ahead and loosen my motor oil release, and that comes off of here. This is the extender that'll allow me to change the motor oil. So I'll just go ahead and get my socket wrench. This one is an 11. And I'll go ahead and take this off. So once I've gotten this socket loose, I'll go ahead and pull it off. Let the motor oil drain out, and that might take a few minutes. So while that's draining, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about the motor oil that goes into the pump. Now this is the non-detergent motor oil that I'm going to be using in my pump. It's very important that you only use non-detergent motor oil in the actual pump. I used the 10W30 in the motor of the pressure washer. It's non-detergent motor oil that you use in the pump. Now there's two ways of telling how much motor oil I have in my pump. As you can see, this is the pump here. Here is the dipstick. This is where you actually put the motor oil, and it also will give me a gauge how much is in there. The easier way of telling how much oil I have in my pump is this little glass window. As long as it's halfway, I know I'm good. It also let me know if I have too much motor oil in there, because I always want it to be halfway, no more, no less. Now you get 500 man-hours of use with each oil change, and I know that I've recently changed my pump oil, but if I were to need to change it, this is the release right here. If I release that with a socket wrench, I can go ahead and drain my motor oil, and once I let the motor oil drain, I use that non-detergent oil and I put it in this cap here where my dipstick is. So now that I've gone over the pump oil, I'm going to come back to my motor oil. It is finished draining, so I'll go ahead and put my Teflon tape on and replace my socket. So I get that socket in, make sure it's nice and snug, and I'll go ahead and replace the oil. Right here is where you put your oil in. Use a funnel so I don't make a mess, and it is 1 quart of this 10W30. Remember, it's 1 quart of the 10W30. This is for the motor oil. Now that I've showed you how to change the oil in the motor and also in the pump, it's always very important that you dispose of your oil correctly. As you can see, our oil is extremely dirty. You don't want to go throwing this in the backyard. You want to take it to a garage or somewhere that can dispose of dirty oil in the proper and safe way. The other thing I want to go over is checking the check valves and making sure that your filter is clean. So I went ahead and showed you how to change the oil in the water pump. The other maintenance issue with the water pump is making sure that the valves, these are the check valves, are clean and particle free. Also the filters. A lot of the water that comes in could possibly have sediments or particles that could clog the filters or get into the check valves. So occasionally you always want to make sure to take all of these off, grease them, and clean them as necessary. These check valves need a 6-point socket to get off. Once you get it on, it's fairly easy to take off. And these just come off. And we basically can oil and clean them as necessary. That's the check valve. Looks fairly clean. The spring is not rusted and doesn't have any dirt. So those are clean. Go ahead and put those back. Remember, with this water, you always want to make sure that everything is clean, because any kind of sediments could cause corrosion in your pump. So you always want to make sure that all the check valves are clean and particle free, and that any kind of filters, if they need to be replaced, you do so, and always keep them clean as well. Like I said before, maintenance on the machine will actually help the pressure washer last longer. So I always like to keep a log of exactly what oil I use, how often I change the oil, and any maintenance I do to the pressure washer.